managing risk to enable resilient growth and human dignity. I'll say that again. Managing risk to enable resilient growth and human dignity. I guess that's probably what most of you are in the business of. And I guess that's kind of what I'm in the business for as well. Managing risk for human dignity is not yet the mission statement of Start Network, but it's actually the mission statement of something that's actually remarkably similar to the Start Network in principle. I'm lucky enough to be the founding chair of a group of the world's largest insurance and reinsurance companies, brokers and regulators, who have decided that the response to the post-2015 agenda, Sendai, SDGs, Paris, Humanitarian Summit, Habitat, will be completely underwhelming unless we embrace and use the ultimate global community product, which is insurance. Insurance is, in some senses, the ultimate institution of society. It's not in the private sector, it's not in the public sector, it's not in the mutual and cooperative sector. It's in the combined sector. And many of us have realized that we're not going to confront the challenges of a transforming society in our century unless we embrace some of the lessons we learnt in the 19th century. So if you come to London in September, you will see St. Paul's Cathedral illuminated in fire. In fact, the whole of the City of London will be ablaze for 2 days, because it's the commemoration of the 350th anniversary of the Great Fire of London. An urban fire, urban conflagration, was the sort of the climate change, sustainable growth challenge of the time. Regularly, cities burnt. In fact, this continued, although the Great Fire of London created the industry which I'm proud to be a member of, things got worse. And in the 19th century, as the UK, Europe, and particularly North America industrialized and urbanized, the fires got bigger. Thousands of people died, month after month, year after year. And you know what? No one really cared. No one really cared, because it didn't cost enough money. And then in 1871, in North America, there were a succession of massive fires, urban fires, from Los Angeles, Green Bay, Chicago, and in 1872, Boston burnt. Hundreds of thousands of people lost their lives, including those who fled to the fields. The rich, the poor, of all races, they all died. But that, unfortunately, wasn't what made the change. The change was that capital was destroyed. And the investors of the time said, we cannot go on like this. We cannot keep losing these assets. And they said, oh, well, we'll just get insurance. So they went to a weak Washington in the 1870s and said, write for us an insurance code for the US. So the insurers went away, and these were grand people of the time. Insurance was a very respected institution. And they did the research on the fires, on the claims, and they came back and they said, 2 years later, they said, well, here's your insurance policy. And people said, oh, we can just carry on now. And they said, can we have our policy? They said, no. They said, well, why not? They said, well, you see, if we just take the insurance and you don't change your behavior, the community pot of capital, which all insurance is, will get used up. So they said, we've got to behave in different ways. The factory owner's got to behave like this and all the rest. They said, well, but we can't do that. That'll cost money. Oh, we can't tell people what to do. So they said, well, you won't have access to this community pot of capital. They said, oh, okay then. So they said, can we have our insurance policy now? They said, no. They said, well, why not? They said, well, because we have to separate the risky businesses and the zoning laws and building codes. We need fire departments. And they said, but we can't do that. That'll cost money. They said, well, that's the price of resilience and sustainable growth. So finally, they said, well, can we have our insurance contract now? They said, no. They said, but why not? They said, well, if there was a big fire in Boston or Chicago, it will wipe out the local industry. we need to use this brilliant new community product called reinsurance, invented in Cologne. And broadly speaking, 10% of every premium that's paid by everybody will go into a global pot. And when there's a big fire in Boston or Chicago, we and our European neighbors will pay those claims, not by charity, but by contractual obligation. Funny thing is, outside of warfare, 50 years later, urban fire, urban conflagration, which had been a scourge for millennia, was ended. Urban morphology had completely changed through some rules of capital and some requirements for literally sustainable capital and sustainable growth. As some of us began to look at the challenges we were facing in the whole post-2015 agenda, we realized that actually at the heart of this was understanding risk, creating proper rules for resilience, and allowing communities at local to global scales to share and manage risk via public, private, and mutual and cooperative mechanisms. So why am I here? Why am I the first person in 3 who's going to talk to you about some pretty innovative ways of applying insurance-related capabilities to the challenges that we all face? Why are so many of us going to Turkey in 2 or 3 weeks' time? The reason is most of the world is uninsured. Most of the world does not know the risk it faces. Most of the world cannot take a benefit from that contractual obligation. I assure you, maybe not entirely in this audience, but for most audiences I speak to, one pays far more in disaster relief and assistance through the insurance premium you pay for your house and your car than you do through giving. It's a remarkable unknown. When you hear that big fire in Calgary, you don't know this, but a few pennies of your insurance contract will pay that $3 billion loss. And because actually there is an economic actor who's driving risk resilience, actually, despite the horrors of that fire, the number of fires and events we have are so small. The tragedy is, in so many countries, in so many places, there's no economic agent allowing risk to be managed, and there's no mechanism formally beyond the state aid and the charity giving, beyond the 25 billion plus, that allows actually society to contractually, globally share the burdens of these events. So that's half the challenge. The other challenge is that over the last 25 years, my industry has moved from relative ruin to relative resilience. So I entered the industry the same month as Hurricane Andrew smashed into the US. Many of you will remember Lloyd's names, and the industry was wiped out. Now we face a separate challenge. We are incredibly resilient because we have applied science, we've got smart capital, and we've got a regulatory framework. So now our challenge, like yours, is actually growth. We have bags of capital, stacks of investors looking to say, we need to take risk. We need to amplify the effects of what governments can spend on protection, on insurance, and bring a great ocean of capital to bear. Our challenge is that we've got all this capital, we've got all this access to communities who want to bring their capital to bear to protect against natural disasters and other vicissitudes, and we have no mechanism for doing it. Almost all insurance demand is driven by public policy and regulation and critical gearbox actors like those in this room. So about 2 years ago or so, maybe a little less, Sean and I got together and we compared notes about the challenges of our both sectors. We compared notes of trying to herd cats and previously, to some degree, competing organizations in charity sector or in the insurance sector to a higher global goal. I think we've cracked it. I think we can help to amplify the effects of your contributions, and I think you'll hear 2 or 3 examples following you. You can rehabilitate the sector that I am proud to serve rehabilitate it, and translate its incredible global membership to drive the sorts of changes that we all want to make. Managing risk to create resilient platforms for sustainable growth and human dignity. Thank you.